All right, now they are looking into special athletic admissions in the wake of these college cheating scheme scandal that seems to grow larger and larger. And a lot of schools, especially some of the elite ones, are rethinking, all right, when I talk to an athletic director or a soccer or a lacrosse coach, am I getting the real skinny here? And should I allow that to potentially besmirch the school? Former Brandeis University president Frederick M says because of this, there is now a trust crisis going on in the admissions business, as it were. Very good to have you, sir. Thank you for coming.
Good to be here, Neil.
Last week I was talking to a former MIT admissions official who was saying, in the past, he would talk to, let's say, the soccer coach or the athletic director. They don't have athletic scholarships at MIT, but they weigh in on them and all of that. And now in this environment, he wonders whether that changes or whether you will then have to tighten things up there. What do you think?
I think the most important thing is to make sure that your admissions people and your athletic people are working in close collaboration. I think where you get into trouble, and some schools probably have, is where the athletic people, instead of getting what we used to call a tip, meaning that they say, here are the people we want for this sport, and then it goes over to the admissions office with that extra thumb on the scale, that extra piece of the file. But then the admissions office really has to run the traps on the academic bona fides of the student. We never thought that our admissions people were supposed to run the traps on the athletic bona fides. I mean, if the basketball coach says we need this kid, I don't send my admissions people to say, can he shoot threes? I assume that the athletic people know what they're doing here. So what's going to happen going forward? Do you stop trusting your people? I don't think that's the answer here. Tightening it up a little bit in terms of making sure there's close collaboration, I think that's the key. And most of the schools, frankly, do that already. The schools that have sort of handed this over to the athletic people, they're learning a hard lesson, and it would be a good thing to tighten it up.
I just wonder how you do tighten it up. I mean, a lot of the slots that were in question here in this scam were not your regular entry slots, but those that were allocated either toward legacy students, those who were, the kids of those who had gone there, special cases, athletic cases, scholarship cases, where you'd have more flexibility, I guess. Is that part wrong? Should it just be everyone general, no distinction for either legacy or athletic talents? Because that would get in the way of schools that look to win the next NCAA basketball championship.
Yeah, look. I think any very strict rule, brittle rule, isn't gonna solve this. When you look at putting a class together, we're looking for a balanced class. You want for students who fill lots of different slots. So you want the students with the high SAT scores, to be sure, but you want your athletes, you want your actors, you want your singers, your musicians, you want your people who have been editors of papers, people who've been the head of the student government. That's what puts together the whole academic community. So those are all the things that are always going to be looked at. But look, the answer here is that you've got to make sure that the people who are in place, who you can rely on, are people who are in fact reliable. I've been asked, was I surprised by this? Am I surprised to know that money plays a role in important decisions that get made in this society? Of course not. That's not just a higher education story. But am I surprised to know that people in whom universities have reposited trust have been lining their own pockets and lying to the people who rely on them? Yes, I am surprised by that. That's outrageous.
So, and some of that stuff is outright illegal if all of a sudden you're photoshopping your kid's, face on a soccer or track star. But I do wonder, I mean, it's no mystery in the past, very rich donors to a potential school donate a lot of money, and then a year or two later their kid's name comes up. With a wink and a nod, that kid gets in, and I'm wondering how common that is.
Well, I wouldn't overstate what the wink and nod means. Is it a plus in the file? In most cases, absolutely. But I can tell you that I had, as a dean, law school dean, and then as a president, I had discussions with donors, and I said, this is not going to work for your kid. I can tell you those are difficult conversations because people assume that it's going to work for their kid. But at the end of the day...
Did you know the kid at that point, Fred, to know that, all right, this kid...
Yeah, no, this would be my admissions office coming to me and saying, we've run the traps on this file. Mr. President, this is somebody who's going to struggle here. I'll tell you, look, Neil, there's a lot of flexibility that you have in these decisions. Sometimes I would tell a donor, here's what we'll do. We'll guarantee the student being able to transfer in if she or he goes to a credible school and is in the top quarter of the class. And sometimes a student would go to some other school and be happy there and stay, and then that's my loss. Sometimes they would be in the top quarter of the class, in which case I was happy to take them. Sometimes a donor would hear that and say, look, that's not what I was hoping to hear. I try to remind them, in the average year, we would send about 8,000 rejection notices at Brandeis, and maybe 30 or 40 of those guaranteed transfers. So I would tell people, look, I know this isn't the news you wanted. You wanted a yes.
Right.
But in fact, you're getting something. And then the student actually is incentivized to go prove him or herself. You know, it's easy to forget what this is about. It is supposed to be, in the overwhelming number of cases,
You're right.
about getting the young people in the right school where they can grow, where they can
about the
succeed.
kid.
You know, that is a very clarifying thing you just said, and I never forgot that. My mother taught high school for 40 years, and she taught me, remember, every one of them is somebody's kid.
Yeah, I remember my mother saying, "You're never going to get into any school, Neil." And
Well, now you wound up at St. Bonaventure, am I right?
All is well with the world. Thank you very, very much, Frederick. Thank you very much. It's really interesting, Frederick Lawrence, as this
Pleasure being with you.
investigation goes on and how wide it is now, and it is getting wider and wider.